Welcome back to the Chiro Money Show, where we're helping chiropractors make better financial decisions so they can build stability in their finances and a lifestyle that they love. We're your hosts, Chris Shield and Scott Campbell, financial planners with Align Wealth.
The day is nearly here, Christopher.
What day is that?
SpaceX IPO.
Wow.
Happening. Yeah. And I feel like it's something that you just won't shut up about. Like, it's been months and months and months of like SpaceX this, IPO date this, like valuation, like you just can't stop talking about it, Chris. So I'm like, we should just have an episode and talk about SpaceX and IPOs and whatever you have to get off your chest and share with the world, you can.
It's going to be such a long episode. I'm glad you brought this up, Scott. Yeah, I'm so passionate about
SpaceX.
IPOs.
Well, why don't we start by talking about what SpaceX is, right?
Can we make sure everyone knows that I'm being sarcastic first?
Yes.
This is like pulling teeth. Like you basically had to force me to be here to talk about this.
No, well, we guided you into the conversation. You're
guided. Okay.
You wanted to be here.
That's more gentle. I want to be here talking to our listeners, but
about SpaceX. Well, it's sometimes you have to have a timely podcast about current events, and there's a big current event happening as of we're recording this on June 10th, and SpaceX IPO is June 12th. So every once in a while, we have to do something with current events. You know, I've heard about SpaceX for a number of years. I had to ask Claude, our AI friend here, what a good 10-second version summary of what SpaceX is. If you're not familiar with SpaceX is, it's Elon Musk's rocket company. It launches things into space. There's a few more sentences, but I'm just going to leave it right there. I think that's good enough, right? It launches things into space.
It's a great summary. Love that.
Yeah. And currently, as of today, estimated valuation of this company that's not publicly listed yet to trade. You can't just go buy SpaceX right now. Currently set to launch at a valuation of approximately 1.75 or 1.8 trillion dollars.
Right up there in space.
Launching things into space.
Yeah.
So some context in terms of that valuation dollar amount. If it does launch at the valuation of 1.8 trillion, it would be launching at a valuation 20% higher than the current valuation of Meta or Facebook. And they've been around for 14 years and absolutely crushing it, of course. That's a pretty high bar to start things off. Would you agree?
Yeah. So this must be a great company if its projected valuation is so high. Let's just explain one more thing here. SpaceX has been around for a while.
Yeah.
This IPO, initial public offering, what this means is that it's essentially being available for a public investor to invest in for the first time.
That's right.
Previously, it was just private. Like, you can't access it unless you're a board member or someone special. You weren't able to access it.
Private equity, right?
Private equity, yeah. So now it's public. Theoretically, anyone can buy it once it becomes listed on the stock exchange.
And I guess the question as to why we're having an episode on this today is maybe there's some of you out there that are curious or have heard about SpaceX IPO, initial public offering. Should I be interested? Should I be lining up in the queue to buy a little piece of this right now when it launches?
No.
That's the question, right?
Episode over.
All right. Christopher's going right to the point here. I don't know why I'm calling you Christopher today, but we'll just roll with it.
That's great.
But yeah, the short answer is probably no, but we're going to have to obviously back this up with why we're not buying into the hype of this IPO or IPOs in general, really.
Really, yeah. Have you ever lined up to get a piece of an IPO, Scott?
Never.
No. Me either.
Never been interested. I've also maybe just what happened? Cool. Great.
That's right.
Wasn't aware. To be fair, I don't think most IPOs are as hyped up and that the whole world knows that there's going to be this initial public offering of this company that Elon Musk is behind. Yeah. Most IPOs are, they're not in the headlines. People don't know that it's happening and when, unless you're in tune with that kind of thing. But
for sure, there's some big ones over the years that maybe people remember, like Facebook maybe. But more often than not, these things are happening where companies are going public, but it's not as big a deal. And it's kind of how it should be, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
Why the hype, Scott? Like, I know Elon is Elon, and popularity or whatever people think about him and what he's done with Tesla and like Starlink and a bunch of things. Like, sure, there's some track record there, but is SpaceX profitable? Is it a good company to invest in?
At the moment, no, like they haven't had a profitable quarter as far as I understand in terms of their track record so far. Don't quote me on that, but what's interesting about the current valuation is that the share price that I believe that they're planning on launching at is about $135 per share, if I'm not mistaken. Again, this could change here between now and when this is actually published, but that's the estimation. It's apparently somewhere in the tune of like 92 times the projected, like basically 92 times the projected sales of what the current sales are. Like basically overinflated in terms of what they're actually bringing in revenue by a very large margin. Right. And for context, NVIDIA is currently trading about 22 times, somewhere in that range, which is also fairly high in terms of expected earnings, expected future cash flows, essentially. Like if there's anything in terms of like buying at the top or buying the hype, this is a perfect an example of what that is.
Yeah. Right. And so with that share price, like the IPO target, like the valuation you mentioned, $1.75 trillion is what basically the value of SpaceX is projected to be.
Correct.
But that's not exactly like the fair market value based on a few weeks ago, a calculation of what the perceived market value is, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that like half of it?
Yeah. Not exactly sure what the process looks like in terms of deciding on that valuation point of $135 per share. But like just back in December of 2025, the valuation was closer to 800 billion, which is still an enormous number, but I don't know what that multiple is, but
yeah,
almost double, right?
Yeah.
In a very short period of time.
Yeah. And this for a company that's not currently profitable, has not had a profitable quarter. So you got to think, what is the valuation based on? Is it based on economic or like fundamental like reasons, or is it based on speculation and people's feelings about the company?
I would say the latter, likely. Right? Yeah.
100%.
Like maybe the general consensus is that people have seen what Elon has done, and like, yeah, whatever your opinion is on Elon Musk, like all like personal feelings aside, like what he's done in business is quite remarkable over the years. Like what he's done with Tesla, like if you're banking on him repeating what he's done historically with like say Tesla, then maybe that's why the hype is so large. It's like, well, if he did that with Tesla, imagine what he's going to do with SpaceX.
Right. It's kind of like
again launching things into space.
Oh, man,
we have to pause here, Chris, but there's a real scenario that, in, I don't know, a decade from now, that we listen back to this episode and we're laughing at us for laughing at a company for launching things into space. Like that could be very common in 10 years from now. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, doesn't the prospectus, like the detailed like offer package for this IPO, like clearly stipulate that like one of Elon Musk's like KPIs, or like one of his goals, is to have 1 million inhabitants on planet Mars. And if he reaches that goal, he is rewarded with hundreds of millions of dollars of bonus. Like,
it's wild.
That's crazy, right? So, I mean, we have no idea if we're going to inhabit Mars one day, or like what that's going to look like. Maybe, and maybe we look like idiots. But at the end of the day, this IPO is just noise. It's just this big hyped up thing, and people get excited about it. But the reality is a lot of us are going to end up owning a fractional percentage of SpaceX through our balanced and diversified portfolio in a pretty timely manner. Isn't that right, Scott?
Yeah, it depends on what your definition of timely is. Maybe it leads to the point that we should make on maybe a broad assumption that given the size, like if, it's fair to say that most people would assume that Meta is very high up in terms of one of the largest companies in the United States. They're part of the Magnificent Seven in the S&P 500. Some might think that just because they're valued at 1.8 million or 1.8 trillion, I should say, that they would be included in the S&P 500 fairly quickly, right? But that's not the case, and you can probably share why that's the case.
Yeah. So for the S&P, they have rules about what kind of characteristics a company needs to meet in order to essentially qualify to be added to the S&P 500. It's not just the biggest 500 companies. You can have a very big a company that has a big valuation and is one of the biggest, but if it doesn't have 2 profitable quarters in a row, it doesn't meet the criteria to be added. And that's kind of the main one here that's holding SpaceX back from being added at this point. There is more criteria that the S&P uses that I'm not super familiar with, but it's interesting that you would think that, okay, well, I'll just own it through the S&P 500. Well, you might one day, but it's not going to be immediately once this thing goes public.
That's right.
However, there are other indices that have different rules, and if you own those, you may have exposure fairly quickly in a matter of like 5 to 15 days. So like the Russell, NASDAQ, MSCI, different companies, different index companies have different rules about adding companies to their index. And so the FTSE Russell index will probably be adding SpaceX within a matter of 5 days. Some position, right?
But the S&P, that could be maybe mid 2027 at the maybe at the earliest. It still needs to have, I think it's you said 2 quarters. It might even be 4. I'm not sure. Somewhere in that range of like, you need to have those repetitive quarters of profitability before you're considered at being added to the S&P 500. But with all that said, even if it was added to the S&P 500 and you had that exposure, the question is like, are IPOs worth the hype? Like, are they actually going to give you the return that you're expecting it to give you? Right. There's some interesting data that we dug up.
Yeah. What does that show, Scott? Is it worth it to get in line for the IPO? What's going to happen?
We looked at this study. We can put the source in the show notes. This study was done apparently from 1980 to 2024. Median IPO, first day pop. So like when it becomes public and accessible, average first day pop, 18.8%. But generally speaking, like it happened with Facebook, it happened with Beyond Meat and Rivian, who had their IPO in 2021, is that there is a really big pop and then things come back down to earth once it gets opened up to retail investors. And like we talked about on previous episodes, if you believe in market efficiency, the global market is going to tell us fairly soon what they think of SpaceX in terms of what the valuation is, right? And it's going to take a little while to get to where they truly believe the value should be. But there's going to be likely a lot of volatility in the short term with SpaceX. But what this study is showing is that the average 3-year return of IPOs from 1980 to 2024, negative 20.5%. That's just the average, right? And apparently roughly over 2/3 lose more than half their value in that 3-year period of time.
Wow. I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
This IPO thing is all hype. It's all about, marketing your company.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not always based on the fundamentals. It's often based on the hype. So I'm in no way surprised about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that at the end of the day, like I'm obviously fascinated to see what happens with SpaceX. I think it's very cool that Elon Musk is launching things into space and he has this goal of getting 1 million people on Mars at some point. All fascinating. And ultimately, if SpaceX turns into the next NVIDIA or Meta or Apple and becomes this like part of the Magnificent Seven, if you want to put them in that category at some point, you'll reap the benefits of that long term in a globally diversified portfolio. But having that exposure early on, especially a large exposure to SpaceX, the data would support that these IPOs are just way overhyped, and the return that you think you might get just won't be there. If you were really gonna say, hey, I believe in SpaceX, I want to have some exposure, I want to take some of my play money and buy a little SpaceX. I don't know. Just my thoughts is like, don't do it at the IPO.
No.
Maybe give it a year or two before you buy in.
Even a month or two is going to tell you a lot.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Like to go back to the Facebook example, like we all know what Facebook/Meta has become, and it's more of the Mag 7. It's a giant company, and it's been a great company to be invested in over the years. But when it went public in 2012, it had like a 50% drop within the first 4 months, and it took over a year after that for it to recover back to the initial IPO price. So if you invested, I mean, assuming when we say investing, we're always talking about long-term investing because that's all that really matters. We're not talking about trading and trying to time the market because we know that's all BS, right? We're talking about investing for the long term to fund your financial independence one day. So 20, 30, 40-year time frames. If you invested in Facebook on day one and held it all the way through to now, you've had a great run. The
Mhm.
reality is most people have not had that great of a return because they've traded it along the way. It hasn't been a buy and a hold. However, if you access Facebook or have exposure to Facebook through one of the funds, like a index fund or mutual fund that you own, that you've held the whole way along this ride, you've had a great journey and great results and exposure to Facebook.
Yeah.
I would guess that if SpaceX is going to be a future Mag 7 type company, it's going to be a very similar story to what happened to Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
That's my future prediction that I never make.
Yeah, we don't make too many predictions on the direction of any one company, but we want to just own them all and focus on what we can control at the end of the day.
Yeah,
For sure. All right, Christopher, did you get everything you needed to get off your chest when it comes to the SpaceX IPO after it's been months now, but you said what you had to say about it? Any final takeaways?
It's just
investing
noise.
should be boring, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Investing should be boring.
Yeah, this is way too sexy. We shouldn't be talking about it.
It's more exotic than it needs to be.
It is. Yeah, and this is not long-term, true investing. This is speculating, it's gambling, it's trying to predict the future. Exactly the opposite of what we feel true long-term investing is.
Yep.
So I guess you know our take. We're not lining up for the IPO. We don't care about the IPO. We haven't been following it other than with this element of curiosity of like what is going to happen, because this is interesting. But we're not putting any money into this, and we kind of
we'll have exposure to it in our portfolio when the time comes in a very small weighting towards it, and we'll carry on. But even to your point of being a gambler, if I was a gambler and a stock picker, then it's also like, well, look at the data, look at what the evidence shows about the history of these IPOs over the last 40, 50 years. It hasn't been a positive experience, even for gamblers.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a good gamble to be making in the first place, if you were that. Yeah. I know Chris hit it off with the short answer here is no, but yeah, we thought I'd just have a fun conversation and talk about it, because I think it's natural for most of us to have curiosity, especially when something like this is in the headlines. And maybe we're naive to think that it's in everyone's headlines, Chris. It's certainly in ours, but it might not be in everyone's. So maybe you weren't even aware that SpaceX was having its IPO this June 12th of the year. But now you're aware. Now you know what's going on. You know our take on it.
Yeah. If you were not aware, please go
Carry
on living your oblivious life and enjoying that. Yeah, that is absolutely appropriate.
Yeah. High five. Carry on.
You're not missing out on anything.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Let's wrap it there, Chris. Good conversation. Thanks as always.
Thanks for bringing up SpaceX. Love it.
Yeah. All right, everyone. We'll see you again next week for another episode of The Cairo Money Show. We'll see you then. All opinions expressed on The Cairo Money Show are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be considered financial, legal, accounting, or tax advice. Always consult your own team of licensed professionals before making decisions about your finances.